My name is Carol, and I'm 47 years old. I've been married for 27 years and live with my husband, who hasn't maintained a consistent job, and our son, Arthur, who's a medical school student. My husband lost his job 18 years ago and hasn't found another one since, leaving him without much direction in life. I work night shifts as a nurse 4 nights a week to support our family. Arthur, who finished his studies at a boarding school, is now in medical school about 3 hours away from our home, staying in a dormitory. Our family dynamics are complex. We live separate lives and rarely spend time together. Arthur's absence due to his studies is understandable, but the gap between my husband and me is particularly deep. Despite my efforts to cover our living expenses and Arthur's education costs through my job, my attempts to communicate with my husband often end in silence. He avoids conversations and leaves the house, making me feel isolated. On my days off, I'm left to manage the household alone or visit Arthur, while my husband's whereabouts remain a mystery. He seldom responds to my messages, leaving me worried about losing our connection. Then, one Saturday morning, after returning home early from a night shift, and looking forward to a day off, I encountered something unexpected. I texted my husband to see if he wanted lunch, only for him to call back immediately, revealing shockingly that he planned to move in with his lover, suggesting that I continue working as I have been. His words were blunt, and his tone was smug, indicating he had already decided without considering my feelings or the impact on our family. This revelation left me stunned and unsure how to respond to such a drastic shift in our lives. I always knew my husband was not the most reliable person, but I never imagined his thought process had deteriorated to this extent. He had consistently avoided meaningful conversations with me and his wife, and had neglected our family's needs in favor of pursuing his whims. It became clear when he casually mentioned his infidelity, attempting to justify it by claiming he's always been attractive to women. His audacity to suggest I should feel grateful for his prolonged presence in our marriage left me bewildered. He insinuated that staying married to me was a favor, given his so-called popularity. He mentioned he only delayed divorce to avoid workplace embarrassment and for the sake of our son, Arthur, becoming independent. Arthur is in his final year of medical school and is close to becoming a doctor, a milestone my husband had been supposedly waiting for before making any drastic changes. He used this as a twisted rationale for his actions, framing them as considerate while dismissing my feelings entirely. When I responded with quiet disbelief, his frustration was palpable, criticizing my demeanor and accusing me of being unaffectionate. Amid my exhaustion from night shifts, his words felt like a surreal blow. His indifference to our marriage and his blatant admission of desiring freedom to pursue other women without financial repercussions from me were shocking. He argued that his unemployment and free time after being laid off were reasons enough to avoid seeking full-time work again, opting instead for casual relationships funded by his means. His plan to move in with someone he had grown close to was the final straw, presenting it as if I had no choice but to comply. The conversation turned to the practicalities of divorce and the division of assets, which he carelessly assumed would be simple since everything was in my name. He expressed a desire to start his new life as quickly as possible, oblivious to the gravity of his request and the impact of his actions on our family's dynamics. The conversation was a vivid illustration of his selfishness and a painful reminder of the emotional distance that had grown between us. Returning from a grueling night shift, the idea of hastily packing up my life and leaving my home was unthinkable. Yet, he expected just that, suggesting a mere 4 days for me to vacate our shared space. Following this, he nonchalantly mentioned that he had left divorce papers for me to sign, as if sealing the end of our marriage with the same ease one might order a cup of coffee. Fueled by a mixture of anger and resolve, I decided not to let his demands dictate my next steps. I needed a moment of peace to gather my thoughts, so I indulged in a soothing bath, trying to soften the edges of my frustration. That evening, after another long shift, I sought comfort in the little things, like my favorite snacks from a convenience store, and the serene beauty of the night sky on my walk home. I planned to enjoy a warm bath to chase away the chill of the early March evening. But then, my phone rang, disrupting the calm. It was him, confused and angry, demanding access to a home he had assumed would remain his, despite his abrupt departure from our lives. 4 days had passed since that pivotal conversation, and as I listened to his accusations over the phone, I couldn't help but find a bitter satisfaction in his predicament. I had indeed moved out, filed the divorce papers, and vanished from his life, leaving no obligations unmet on my end. His outrage over being locked out was met with a simple explanation from me. I had no reason to facilitate his new life with someone else, especially not in a home that was mine, rented under my name after he had been laid off. He was outside, trying to enter, causing a scene late into the night, oblivious to the fact that the house, the lease, everything was in my name. The realization dawned on him slowly as he grasped the extent of his oversight. He had forgotten who had been managing the finances, who had been the backbone of our household stability. I made sure my voice was loud and clear, especially knowing he might not be alone, emphasizing that not a single cent for that house came from him. His silence was telling. He had been caught in his web of lies, likely in front of the woman he was trying to impress. The truth was undeniable. I had been the one paying the rent, the one responsible for everything he had taken for granted. At that moment, I reclaimed my independence, leaving him to confront the reality of his actions and the consequences that followed. Since I was the one covering the rent, it seemed only logical for me to end the lease when I decided to leave. This meant the house no longer belonged to us, effectively rendering his keys useless. When he realized this, his disbelief was palpable, quickly turning to panic as he inquired about his belongings. With deliberate intention, I had moved his things to his parents' house, knowing full well his reluctance to face them due to their constant pressure on him to secure employment. Upon hearing this, his frustration was unmistakable. To add to his dismay, I informed him that I had also shared news of our impending divorce with his parents, explaining that his financial inability necessitated the relocation of his possessions to their home. His parents, ever practical and supportive, had taken the news with understanding, much to his chagrin. His reaction to my straightforwardness was mixed with shock and silence. I couldn't help but confront him about his years of neglect and selfishness. Despite never contributing financially or emotionally, he dared to criticize our son Arthur's efforts and achievements. I challenged his notion of fatherhood, pointing out his absence in both our lives and his lack of meaningful involvement in any household responsibilities. His self-centeredness was evident in every action he took, from neglecting family duties to pursuing his pleasures without a second thought for his family. I reminded him that self-love doesn't absolve one of responsibility, especially when it comes to family. He defended his actions by claiming his presence in the house was his way of fulfilling his role as a father, a claim that fell flat given his minimal involvement in our lives. The conversation laid bare the reality of our situation, a family dynamic strained by his selfish actions, and a marriage crumbling under the weight of unmet expectations and responsibilities. His attempts to justify his behavior only highlighted the distance between his perception of fatherhood and the reality of his contributions, or lack thereof, to our family. Living under the same roof with this man for 27 years and considering him in the role of a father made me deeply reflect on the entire situation. The realization of the vast gap in understanding what it means to truly take responsibility left me sighing in disbelief. The thought alone was almost enough to bring me to tears. However, with our divorce finalized, I found some solace in the fact that we would no longer be living together, and I wouldn't have to expect him to fulfill any parental duties towards Arthur anymore. His response, a dismissive remark about parting ways with a gloomy woman like me, only reinforced my decision. Yet, I made it clear that he would still need to face the consequences of his actions, particularly his infidelity, which would not only affect him but his mistress as well. His shock was evident, perhaps because he had never considered the legal and financial repercussions of his actions. I explained to him that his affair, a clear act of infidelity, had legal implications, especially since his mistress was aware of his marital status. His feigned ignorance on why I was bringing this up now, after all these times I had subtly hinted at his indiscretions through messages urging him to come home and behave responsibly, highlighted his continued disregard for our marriage. His audacity had grown to the point where he openly expressed his desire to leave and start a new life with his mistress, underlining the need for him to take responsibility. The conversation took a turn when I mentioned Hannah by name, revealing not only did I know about her, but I also had evidence of her, visits to our house through the intercom camera recordings. This revelation threw him into further shock, especially when I mentioned that Arthur was aware of her, something he hadn't anticipated. Their subsequent argument, audible over the phone, made it clear that they were both taken aback by my knowledge and the implications of their actions. I had to raise my voice to quell their pointless bickering, emphasizing the futility of their arguments and my intention to conclude this conversation swiftly. It was a moment of clarity for me, as I realized the importance of moving forward from this chapter, no longer entangled in the web of deceit that had marred our relationship. The conversation served as a final affirmation of my decision to leave behind a situation that no longer served me or Arthur, stepping into a future where we could seek happiness and fulfillment away from the shadows of the past. When I discussed my concerns with our son Arthur, who was 22 and fully capable of understanding adult matters, I opened up about everything. I told him about the women you were bringing into our home and even showed him the evidence captured through our intercom's camera. Although he didn't recognize anyone initially, it all changed when we reviewed the footage together about a year ago. Arthur identified one of the women as his friend's ex-girlfriend, someone he had never met personally but had seen in photos and even spotted once in public, which had indirectly led to his friend's breakup. That's how I came to learn about Hannah, the lounge hostess. Despite the surprise and disbelief from your end, the facts were undeniable. You tried to downplay the significance of identifying her, questioning how I could hold her accountable without even knowing her address. I confidently informed you that not only did I know where she lived, but I also had details about her parents' home. It wasn't difficult to piece together, thanks to Arthur's knowledge and the resources available to anyone determined enough to find information. With a lawyer already involved, I stressed the importance of legal responsibility for both of you, shaking your complacent belief that a divorce could shield you from the consequences of your actions. Your protests about alimony and the possibility of claiming it post-divorce only highlighted your ignorance of the law and the seriousness of your situation. Your attempts to dismiss the situation as a joke or something that could be slept off were met with my firm understanding of my rights, including the possibility of claiming alimony for infidelity even after our divorce was finalized. Each moment of silence from your end felt like a small victory, lightening the burden of years of neglect and disappointment. The revelation that you might end up depending on Hannah financially, given your track record and her job as a lounge hostess, brought your freeloading tendencies into sharp focus. My determination to pursue alimony not just from you but potentially from her as well, based on your actions, left you flustered and defensive. And your hopes of escaping this situation by moving or hiding were quickly dashed with the knowledge that I was actively monitoring her residence, ensuring that no matter what, you'd face the consequences of your choices. All of this, including the full scope of your actions, had been shared with your parents, ensuring that the circle of accountability was tightly drawn around you. Discovering the whereabouts of her parents, I made it clear to my ex-husband and his mistress that any attempt to evade their responsibilities would prompt immediate action from my end. With a firm goodbye, I ended the call, not bothering to linger on their responses. It was time to let go of the stress that had accumulated, and I sought refuge in the comfort of a warm bath. The hot water seemed to wash away not just the physical, but also the emotional residues of the day's tensions. My stern approach paid off. They didn't attempt to flee or evade responsibility. With the help of my lawyer, I managed to secure alimony from both my ex-husband and his mistress. Although the sum from my unemployed ex-husband was modest, securing a significant amount, $75,000, from his mistress was an unexpected but welcome outcome. This victory wasn't about the money itself, but about seeking justice and closure from the ordeal. Contemplating what to do with this unexpected financial boon. My son Arthur, who had recently moved back in with me following his graduation and job confirmation, suggested a carefree approach. Use it however you wish, Mom. It's not the kind of money to save. Think of it as a lottery win and just enjoy it, he advised, hinting at the idea of spending it on experiences rather than material goods. Inspired by his suggestion, I considered taking a trip together, something just for the two of us. Given Arthur's rigorous academic commitments through medical school and my demanding night shift schedule, we hadn't enjoyed a proper family vacation since he was a child. Arthur, understanding and appreciative of the sacrifices I had made, including the hard work to ensure he could attend private schools and medical school, expressed gratitude rather than resentment for any perceived shortcomings in his upbringing. The idea of a trip sparked a newfound excitement between us. It was an opportunity not just to explore new places, but to make up for lost time and create new memories together. This plan for a trip, born out of the end of a tumultuous chapter of our lives, symbolized a fresh start and a chance to celebrate the strength and resilience that had seen us through. Arthur's acknowledgement of my efforts filled me with a sense of pride and validation, affirming that despite the hardships, we had emerged stronger and more united as a family. Arthur acknowledged the hard work we both put into reaching this point in our lives. He reminded me of his decision to attend a public medical school to ease the financial burden of tuition fees. Still, I had supported him with housing and living expenses, contributing to his journey towards becoming a doctor. His words of thanks touched me deeply, stirring a mix of joy and tears. "Hey, smile if you're happy," he said, his words causing my emotions to swell even further, but I managed to smile genuinely, overwhelmed by his appreciation. "Thank you," I responded, marveling at how well he had grown despite the challenges our family faced. It was a testament to our collective resilience and love. In a spirit of gratitude and celebration, we decided to use the unexpected windfall for a trip, a chance to create new memories together. Arthur's excitement was infectious as we brainstormed destinations and plans for our adventure, contemplating how to make the most of the $75,000. His enthusiasm reminded me of his childhood, yet his next suggestion showcased the mature young man he had become. "Oh, and Mom, it's time you quit your night shift nursing job," he proposed. His rationale was simple. With his graduation approaching and our new living arrangement, there was no longer a need for me to endure the demanding schedule. He wanted me to prioritize my well-being and desires, a thought that moved me deeply. "Let's go all out. We can travel anywhere abroad, and I'll be right there with you," he continued, his proposal sounding like a dream. With his spring break 2 months away, we had a perfect window of opportunity to embark on this journey. The excitement of planning our trip together marked a new chapter for us, a chance to strengthen our bond further and make up for the time we couldn't spend together in the past. As I prepared for a relaxing bath, my mind danced with possibilities for our destination. This trip represented more than just a vacation. It was a celebration of new beginnings and the strong bond between a mother and her son. With Arthur's support, I felt ready to embrace a future filled with hope, love, and shared adventures. Humming a tune, I stepped into the bath, allowing the warmth of the water to envelop me as I daydreamed about the places we would see together. This moment of tranquility was a reminder of the beauty of letting go and moving forward, hand in hand with those we love.